The census for England and Wales is a detailed survey of all households completed by the householders themselves. Its purpose is to compile statistics which can be used by government, business, and other organisations for planning purposes and to target resources and services. The first detailed census was taken in 1841, and they have been compiled every 10 years since then. To protect personal information, the census is closed to the public access for 100 years. That means that the most recent census we have access to is 1911. Once opened, they're an invaluable tool for anyone interested in family or local history. Before the census, most women remained unnamed and unrecorded. Only the wealthiest or most prominent women tended to leave their mark on history. But between 1841 and 1911, we have a record of all women, their ages, families, occupations, and where they came from. For the first time, we can tell their stories. So what role did women play during this period, and how did their position in society change, if at all? What can the census tell us? Hillingdon in the mid-19th century was largely a rural backwater, untouched by the Industrial Revolution. A majority of women in the area spent their lives looking after the home, and those that did work had jobs which would have changed little in hundreds of years. The 1851 census for Hayes shows that 52% of women were listed as not working. 16%, by far the largest proportion of working women, were employed in domestic service. As for the rest of the female working population, they were either involved in farm work, dress and hat making, laundry, cleaning, shopkeeping, teaching, or caring. Life for urban women in 1851 was pretty similar. In the Belliard slum district of Uxbridge, women tended towards dressmaking, laundry, cleaning, or street selling, though one, a seamstress, lived with a husband who stuffed birds for a living. Perhaps she helped with his work. For the majority of women engaged in domestic service, over 1 million across the country in 1891, working life could involve long hours, harsh treatment, and separation from their families. Servants had a rigid hierarchy, with the housekeeper at the top, followed by head housemaid and laundry maid, or else the cook, kitchen maid, dairy maid, and scullery maid. The 1871 census for Hillingdon Court lists 20 female servants for a family of 8. They came from all over the country. Mary Moss, the 56-year-old housekeeper, came from Wales. Mary Blenkiron, 26, lady's maid, hailed from Yorkshire. Most serving staff would have been recruited through newspaper ads or by specialist agencies. Early in the 20th century, 2 local developments led to new employment opportunities for women: the opening of the Metropolitan Railway line to Uxbridge and the industrialisation of Botwell Town in Hayes. In 1908, the Metropolitan line was extended from Harrow. Ruislip quickly became a tourist destination for city workers eager to sample the area's clean air. The local population responded by setting up refreshment rooms and tea gardens. Though these were run by men in 1911, many women such as Edith Lucas, Alice Raymond and Cordelia Fieldgate found waitressing in them a less onerous alternative to farm work or domestic service. From around 1900, the area around the Grand Junction Canal in Botwell became populated with factories. The Great Western Railway through Hayes had opened around 1840, and the nearby station offered ready transport of goods to London. The factories quickly offered a wealth of new opportunities for women. Factory work also offered regular working days and holidays. There was a postage stamp works, photographic works, the Aeolian factory which produced piano rolls. The building is still standing near Hayes Sorting Office, and the X-Chair Company. But the most important was the Hayes Gramophone Works. We know it now as EMI. The first sod was cut at the factory site in 1907 by famous tenor Edward Lloyd. The 1911 census, only 4 years later, shows how great an effect the factory had on the lives of local working women. Here are just some of the women who lived in nearby Blythe Road and Clayton Road. Elsie Pearman, music record finisher. Mrs. Sarah Harris, packer. Eliza Harris, record edge grinder. Emily Hill, record examiner. Florence Blarman, gramophone packer. Edith Mann, cardboard box maker. Ellen Mary Chandler, distributing clerk. So all manner of work from packing and record making to office duties. Not all factory work brought benefits though. In 1882, the United Asbestos Company, later Bell's Asbestos, opened a factory in Harefield next to the canal. By 1911, 18% of the village's working population worked in the factory, the largest proportion employed in any local firm. Female workers tended to be employed spinning or weaving the asbestos fibres. At the same time, medical experts were just beginning to link asbestos to deaths, lung disease, and other health problems. It's also worth noting that even in 1911, a large proportion of Harefield's women were still employed in jobs such as baking, shopkeeping, cleaning, nursing, dressmaking, laundry, or domestic service. Before the introduction of compulsory education in 1870, women as young as 9 or 10 could be required to work, though this often depended on the parents' economic status. Most were sent into service in great houses or in local farms. In 1851, Elizabeth Brill of Ruislip, aged 9, was listed as a servant. Helen Leather, 14, was a house servant in an all-female household in Hayes. This must have been a huge responsibility for one so young. The household was made up of Eleanor Clark, who lived on her own investments, and her sisters, Mary Ann and Hannah, who had shares in Waterworks Company. In fact, a large number of women in Hayes in 1851 were able to live off their own means, or as the widows of wealthy husbands. Juliana Hume Campbell of Highgrove House, Eastcote, in 1871 appears to have run a household of 12 servants in the absence of her husband. The role of women practically as business managers of large households was a well-established one and continued well into the early years of the 20th century. The expected role of women as housekeepers and child rearers in a quite limiting, largely patriarchal society took its toll on the mental health of some. Hysteria was a Victorian term for a raft of symptoms suffered by several women, often from wealthier backgrounds. We know them today as anxiety, stress, and depression. Hayes Park Asylum in 1881 was a nursing home for wealthier women with mental health issues. It was staffed by women along the same lines as the serving staff of larger houses, with housemaids, cooks, kitchen maids, and the like. Life there was apparently comfortable, with walks and carriage rides, and apartments for some of the patients. The 1881 census lists one inmate as a Lady H.M. 32. This was one of the most renowned women of her time, Lady Harriet Mordaunt. Lady Mordaunt came to prominence through a famous divorce case. Letters from the Prince of Wales, later Edward VII, were found in her bedroom, and the Prince was forced to give evidence. Lady Mordaunt had suffered what was reported as erratic behaviour following a difficult birth the year before, and a verdict of mental disorder was given at the trial. She sadly spent most of her life in a succession of institutions. Of course, some women during this period lived lives to some extent separate from the rest of society. Alice Boynes in Harefield, for instance, captained her own canal boat. Eliza Brough in West Drayton was a theatrical actress, though we have yet to find any details on her life. Mary Walnuth and her 2 daughters ran a school for dancing in Ruislip. The census shows that many women were immigrants from as far afield as America or the East Indies. What it cannot do is answer questions on their ethnic background. Susanna Brock from Barbados was living in Harlington in 1911, a widow. Mary Wilson, a visitor at the house of a Harlington furnisher in 1901, hailed from Virginia. Jane Gibbs, wife of an Uxbridge carrier in 1881, was born in Georgia in the American South. Were these women of Afro-Caribbean descent or simply British colonial settlers returning home? Their stories remain to be told. Several women born in India ended up living locally, though the conditions they found themselves in are perhaps surprising. Ellen Chandler, born in Agra, ended up in slum housing in Chequers Yard, Uxbridge, her husband a coal carrier with 5 children. Maria Wright from Bangerton found herself landlady of the Swan and Bottle pub. Elizabeth Colcott from Barali was living in Cross Street, Uxbridge, supporting herself through needlework. European immigration seems to have been rare but widespread. Apollonia Lochner from Bavaria in 1851 was working at the local home of a member of the armed forces, with the Baroness of a wealthy German family and her 3 granddaughters. Wilhelmina Hessels from Holland found herself in less salubrious surroundings, living in 1901 in Wooden Row, Uxbridge, with her husband Dirk, a South African costermonger or street trader. Maria Granger, a 73-year-old Danish widow, was forced to live on charity when she found herself an occupant of the Lynch almshouses in Uxbridge in 1881. Potentially, the most romantic story is of Paul and Clara Godin. They were landlords of the Brewery Tap in Uxbridge in 1911. Paul came from France, Clara from Switzerland. What brought them together in the first place, and how did they come to be running an English pub? These, then, are the lives of local women through the census. Apart from the opportunities offered by factory work, the experiences of most women changed little between 1841 and 1911. However, this was soon to change. The increasing role of women during the First World War, the selling of landed estates, suburbanisation, and the more liberated views of the 1920s would mark a great change in women's lives. It'll be fascinating to see what the 1921 census shows when it's released next year.